My parents only had me to take care of my violent sister, now they want me back. But I made a choice they never saw coming. My older sister Rose was a massive bully throughout my life, and living with her was often a painful and difficult experience. To be completely honest, Rose has ADHD. Her constant hyperactivity and aggressiveness made her an extremely challenging person to share a home with, especially during our childhood. When I was born, Rose was already 5 years old, and her reaction to my arrival was far from warm or welcoming. From the start, she struggled with the attention I received from our parents. It's not uncommon for older siblings to feel jealous or displaced by a new baby, but Rose's feelings ran particularly deep. She would throw full-blown tantrums whenever my parents spent any time with me, as though my mere existence was an offense to her. All I remember from my childhood is my sister stealing my toys. She would snatch them away without a second thought. Birthdays, which should have been joyous occasions for me, became scenes of chaos. Rose would scream, cry, and make dramatic scenes, completely overshadowing my celebration. Instead of feeling special on my special day, I often felt humiliated by my sister's behavior. As I grew older, Rose's behavior became even more targeted. She started to take her frustrations out on me physically. Sometimes she would push me out of her way, even when there was no real need to do so. Other times she would bite me, an action that felt deliberately hurtful and mean for no reason. It was clear that her disdain for me wasn't just a passing phase. It felt like she resented me deeply for taking the spotlight and disrupting the dynamic she had with our parents before I came along. Rose never had any friends. My parents, in their efforts to make her feel included, arranged playdates. But these should have been fun gatherings turned into tense, unpleasant encounters, where I constantly had to mediate or apologize for her behavior. Over the years, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of resentment toward my sister. I couldn't understand why she wasn't like other people, or why she couldn't control her emotions. She didn't seem to like me very much, and would often pick fights with me. Living with her was confusing and hurtful. I longed for a sister who would protect me, not one who constantly tormented me or made me feel unwanted. What made everything worse was my parents' lack of compassion toward me. They absolutely adored Rose, and it felt like they were completely blind to how her bullying affected me. Every time I tried to voice my frustrations or explain how much her behavior hurt me, they would brush it off. They'd explain that Rose was a special kid and needed my understanding and patience at all times. Even though I was younger than her, I was expected to accommodate her needs and moods, even when it came at the expense of my own happiness. I remember when I turned 13, I desperately wanted a special trip just for the three of us, my parents and me. I spent days begging and trying to convince them. After a lot of pleading and negotiating, they finally agreed. The plan was set. Rose would stay with our grandparents for 3 days, and I'd finally have my moment. But when Rose found out, she threw a massive fit, crying inconsolably for hours, yelling, throwing things, and even getting in my face, screaming threats like she would kill me for trying to take our parents away from her. Honestly, it was terrifying and overwhelming to see her anger directed at me with such intensity. My parents, instead of standing up for me, began pleading with me to let Rose come along. They tried to reason with me, saying it was the only way to calm her down. I resisted at first, knowing deep down that if she came, the trip I had dreamed of would be ruined. But with Rose raging uncontrollably and my parents desperate, I felt I had no choice but to give in. Once again, her behavior dictated the outcome, and I was left to accommodate her. As I feared, bringing Rose turned the trip into another disaster. From the moment we arrived at Disneyland, she refused to enjoy anything like other kids. She wouldn't sit on any rides and was glued to my mother's side the entire time. She constantly complained about feeling overwhelmed by the crowds and how much she hated everything. Her screams and cries quickly became the focus of everyone's attention, drowning out the excitement I had been holding on to for weeks. Within just 2 hours, Rose was pleading with my parents to take us back to the hotel, completely unraveling what should have been a magical day. In the end, my parents had to split up to make the situation somewhat manageable. My mother drove Rose back to the hotel while my father stayed with me so I could at least try to salvage what was left of the day. While I appreciated my dad's effort, the entire experience felt ruined. instead of the joyful and carefree celebration I had imagined, my birthday was once again marked by Rose's needs and tantrums taking precedence. I know my parents truly did their best with the cards they were dealt, but it was painfully obvious that my sister's needs and priorities always came before mine. Rose demanded their attention 24/7, and no matter what I did, I was always an afterthought. While they believed they were doing what was right to help Rose, it often left me feeling invisible, like my needs and feelings didn't matter compared to hers. By the time I turned 17, I had reached my breaking point with my sister's constant bullying and my parents' constant ignorance. I started dreaming of freedom, of finally living a life where I wasn't overshadowed by my sister's needs or my parents' expectations. I began applying to colleges, deliberately focusing on ones far away from home. When my parents found out about my plans, they were furious. They didn't understand or perhaps refused to see why I felt the need to leave. They urged and practically begged me to stay in our hometown, arguing that Rose needed me, that I was her sibling and had a responsibility to be there for her. I argued that I didn't care about Rose, and that I would continue applying to faraway colleges no matter what they felt. This is when my parents revealed the real reason they wanted me to stay. They explained that after their retirement, they intended to travel and enjoy their lives, expecting me to take over 100% responsibility for Rose. They told me how they had been sacrificing their lives for years, so it would eventually be my time to step up. First of all, I had never been consulted about my parents' long-term plan, nor had I ever given them any reason to believe I'd be willing to take responsibility for my sister. Secondly, I had no intention of becoming her caretaker. I wasn't her parent, and I felt it was unfair and unreasonable for them to expect that from me. So, I expressed this to them as clearly as I could. I suggested that they could still enjoy their retirement and go on cruise trips without my sister if they made other arrangements, such as hiring a full-time caretaker or teaching Rose to be more independent, at least for a few days at a time. My mom argued back that Rose would never be comfortable with a caretaker and insisted that she required 24/7 monitoring, which could only be done by a family member, meaning me. My dad agreed, going as far as to call me selfish for not agreeing to their ridiculous plan. Their comments stung deeply. As if that wasn't enough, my dad then revealed that the whole reason they even had me, their second child, was so that I could eventually grow up and take care of Rose in the future. I froze. My mind reeled as the weight of that revelation settled over me. I stared at them in silence, my eyes wide with disbelief. My mom quickly jumped in, scolding my dad for sharing that secret and telling him to apologize for saying such a thing. She then tried to backtrack, claiming he didn't really mean it and that, of course, they loved me too. But her words felt hollow. The damage was done. I couldn't unhear what he had said, and it was then that I finally understood why I had always felt invisible compared to my sister. The idea that my existence had been framed as a solution for Rose's care, rather than as my own person with my own aspirations, was devastating. My mom kept insisting that Rose needed help and that, as part of the family, I had a duty toward her. She even argued that going to college far away wouldn't improve my life in any way, claiming that staying in our hometown was the better option. Living at home, she reasoned, would save me money on rent and other expenses. I understood that Rose had a condition, but did that mean I wasn't entitled to a life of my own? Did I have to forfeit my future just because she existed? The thought was suffocating. I didn't say much to my parents at that moment, knowing it wouldn't help to change their minds, but inwardly, I felt more resolute than ever to leave. I ignored their pleas and threw myself into my college applications, even more determined to escape them. It wasn't easy, but I worked tirelessly, and in the end, my efforts paid off. I finally got into a good enough college to make it worth the leap. When I shared the news with my parents, they were furious. They outright refused to let me go and tried everything they could to guilt-trip me into staying. Although I was 18 by this time, I knew I still needed external help to escape my parents, so I turned to my grandparents, calling them and pleading for their support. My grandmother, always a steady and loving presence in my life, immediately came over, helped me pack my bags and documents, and offered me a place to stay with her and my grandfather until it was time for me to leave for college. My parents didn't stop there. They threatened to cut me off financially, refusing to help with any of my college expenses. They warned that if I left, I would be on my own forever, and that they'd sever ties with me altogether. But even then, I did not bow down. I took out a student loan to fund my education. On top of that, my grandfather stepped in, offering to cover part of my expenses with his retirement savings. It broke my heart to accept his help, knowing how hard he and my grandmother had worked for that money. They were doing what my parents should have been doing, offering love, encouragement, and financial support. The next 4 years of my life were a blur of hard work and determination. College was challenging, not just academically but emotionally. While most of my classmates had supportive parents and enough money to party or go out, I did not have the same privilege. I spent almost every day studying as hard as I could to support myself financially. I even took on a part-time job as a server, juggling long shifts and late nights with my coursework. Those years weren't easy, but I pushed through because I knew I had no other choice. Meanwhile, my parents never reached out to me, not even once, to see how I was doing or if I needed any help. The silence from them was deafening. Sometimes I questioned my worth, wondering if I truly deserved to be abandoned like this by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But even then, I refused to give up and told myself that as long as I kept going, I'd eventually build a life for myself. After graduating, I was incredibly fortunate to land an amazing job. It was the opportunity I'd been working so hard for, and it felt like the first real reward for all the sacrifices I had made over the years. With this job, I was finally able to begin paying off my student loans. More importantly, I started repaying the money my grandfather had given me to help when my parents wouldn't. He had never expected me to pay him back. It was a gift of love, not a loan, but it mattered deeply to me to ease his burden, to show him that his faith in me had not been misplaced. I continue to have a close, loving relationship with my grandparents. Whenever I can, I book tickets for them to visit me, making sure they know how much I appreciate everything they've done for me. This year, I began hearing troubling stories about my sister from my grandparents. It seems Rose's behavior has escalated over the years, and since I was no longer her target, she had turned her bullying toward other people. This year, she started bullying neighborhood kids living in the locality. Apparently, she had been throwing water at the kids whenever they played outside and trying to intimidate them by yelling that they weren't allowed to play in her area. Unsurprisingly, the kids' parents became concerned and complained to my parents multiple times, pleading with them to address Rose's behavior and keep her away from their children. But, as usual, my parents didn't take effective action. They assumed Rose would eventually get bored and leave them alone. However, Rose continued her antics, and the situation boiled over when one of the parents, fed up with her constant bullying, called the police on her. When the police arrived, they saw Rose throwing water at one of the kids and yelling at her to run for her life. Immediately, Rose was arrested for harassing minor children. My parents protested, but the police scolded them as well for not keeping Rose in check. While this news shocked some in the family, it didn't surprise me at all. I had seen her behavior go unchecked for years, knowing full well that my parents were more interested in making excuses for her than holding her accountable. Still, the reality of my sister facing legal trouble was a harsh reminder of just how troubling her behavior had become. My parents ended up bailing her out, but now Rose is facing an upcoming court case. This week, I received a call from my parents, which completely caught me off guard. After 6 years of silence, it felt surreal to see their number pop up on my phone. My dad told me how he and my mom were at their wits' end dealing with my sister. He said they wanted to reconcile with me, claiming they'd missed me for years but had been too angry and stubborn about my decision to leave for college, so they hadn't contacted me. It was like he was trying to rewrite the narrative, glossing over years of hurt and abandonment with a half-hearted apology. I could already feel that he and Mom had called because they needed something, so I asked them to just spit it out. This is when Dad explained that, with my sister's impending court case, they were finally beginning to see the truth, that maybe I'd been right all along about my sister. My dad admitted, albeit reluctantly, that my sister was in fact a bully. She had become worse over the years since I was gone, and had been getting into more and more trouble. Dad told me how he and Mom had talked, and now they felt sorry for everything I had gone through and admitted that they should have listened to me more. He told me that they were now finally willing to send Rose to therapy so she could get the help she clearly needed. Hearing those words from him felt almost surreal, especially when I had spent so much of my childhood begging him and Mom to take action against my sister, only to be dismissed or told to understand Rose's behavior. Dad continued, saying they wanted to meet with me and apologize in person if I was willing to listen. This is when I told my dad as calmly as I could that while I was glad to see them finally give my sister the help she needed, the truth was, I just didn't care anymore. Too much time had passed without them even bothering to contact me, and over the years, I had come to terms with their absence and built a life that no longer included them. I wasn't willing to reconcile with them now. My dad tried to push back, urging me to reconsider. Am I the asshole if I don't reconcile with my family, especially after the way they treated me for years? My sister was never bullied. She went to a special school designed for kids with needs like hers, and it was a very small, well-monitored environment. The school only allowed a handful of special needs students, and they were kept watch over at all times throughout the day. Her teachers were great and took excellent care of her, and my parents were always involved in her life, checking on her regularly. There's no way my sister was somehow bullied at school, and that's why she took out her anger on me. The truth is, her problems were never about external factors, they were about how she was allowed to behave at home. She was mean to me constantly, and my parents let her get away with it. If she bit me, slapped me, or shoved me, she faced no repercussions. Meanwhile, I was always expected to pacify her or be more understanding about her behavior. As for why Rose was never sent to therapy, the simple truth is that therapy was always too expensive for my parents to even think about. On top of that, my mom has always had this possessive attitude when it came to Rose. She never allowed her to spend much time with anyone but her, as she believed that only she understood all her needs. As a result, Rose is overly dependent on my mom, and she is the one who makes any decisions regarding her. Now that I've gone through all the comments under my post, it's clear to me why my parents are reaching out after all this time. The answer is obvious. They probably need my help with my sister's upcoming court case. I think they might want me to offer a character reference for her if it comes to that. Or maybe they are hoping I can assist with the lawyer fees since I earn well, and they might be aware of it. I know after all these years it cannot just be about reconnecting. It feels more about their desperation to fix things, especially with the legal trouble Rose is facing. They need someone to back her up, and I suspect they think I can be that person. I'm sure they want me to step in and be the good son who helps them fix their mess. But I'm not going to do that. For everyone asking how my grandparents feel about my parents wanting to reconnect with me, they're not exactly thrilled about it. Over the years, they don't really talk much with my parents, especially after everything that happened when I was kicked out and wanted to go to college. Since then, the relationship between them has been strained, and they've mostly kept their distance. The only reason my grandparents have stayed in contact with my parents at all is because they sometimes have to help out with Rose, whether it's babysitting or taking care of her when my parents need assistance. My grandparents know exactly what Rose is like. They've seen it firsthand, her bullying, her behavior, and they're disappointed in how my parents have handled everything over the years. They've always been supportive of me, but when it comes to Rose, they've never been blind to her actions or excused them. So with my parents now wanting to mend things and reconnect with me, my grandparents have made it clear that they understand my hesitation. They've asked me to be cautious. They know how hurt I have been because of my parents, and they don't want me to rush into something that might end up being more painful. Also, my parents have continued to send me messages this week strongly urging me to consider giving them another chance. They keep emphasizing how much they regret the way things have been between us and how they've realized they made mistakes. As a result, I feel torn, to be honest. My suspicions were right about my parents. Today, I finally agreed to a video call with them after they had been asking me for weeks. It had been such a long time since we'd last seen each other, and honestly, I was feeling a mix of emotions leading up to the call. When I finally saw them on the screen, I couldn't help but notice how different they looked. They appeared much older than I remembered. Tired, worn out even. It broke my heart a little seeing them that way. Despite the emotions swirling inside me, I tried to keep myself composed. We talked about their lives, about how things had been for them, and then I told them a little about my work. We discussed my grandparents, catching up on the little things that had happened in our family. Our conversation felt almost normal, like no time had passed since I had last seen them. My parents also apologized to me again. They seemed almost desperate in their words, asking me to come visit them, promising they'd been thinking about me. But at that moment, I couldn't hold back any longer. I asked them outright, why now? If you had really missed me, wouldn't you have reached out sooner during college when I was away and actually needed your support? You hadn't made any effort to stay in touch, so what's different now? Why are you suddenly so eager to reconnect after all this time? That's when my parents, almost reluctantly, started to reveal the real reason they had reached out to me. They explained that they were in desperate need of financial help to take care of my sister, Rose. My dad told me that over the years they had spent almost all of their savings on Rose's constant medical treatments. The costs had drained them, and now, with her legal case pending and the potential therapy she would need for her behavioral issues, the financial burden was becoming overwhelming. My dad finally asked me, almost pleadingly, if I could perhaps start sending them some money every month since I was doing so well in life. My mom quickly chimed in, making it clear that the money would only be used for Rose, nothing else. I shook my head in response, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I asked him, voice trembling with frustration, "Do you seriously think I would just send you my hard-earned money to spend on Rose? No matter how much you need it, how could I possibly help you with her? She's the one who bullied me all those years. She's the one who made my life hell. She's the one who ruined every single birthday celebration I ever had." My voice cracked as I continued. She's the one who never once showed any sympathy or care for me, so why would I help her now? The history between me and Rose was so painful, and now they wanted me to step in and be the financial savior for someone who had treated me with such cruelty. It didn't make sense, and I couldn't let go of the years of hurt. I didn't stop there, though. All my frustration and years of bottled-up resentment came rushing out. I pointed out to my parents that they had never protected me from Rose. They had never shown me any real compassion when it came to her. Instead, they just expected me to fall in line, to play along with their narrative, and take care of her as if everything she did was just something I had to accept. I was a child and I needed their protection, but they had failed me multiple times. I pointed out that even though Rose has ADHD, it doesn't mean she shouldn't be held accountable for her actions, now that she's a grown woman. I blamed my parents and made it clear that if they had actually gotten her proper help back when she was younger, maybe things would have been different today. Maybe she would have turned out to be a better person, someone capable of understanding the hurt she sometimes causes to other people. But they hadn't. They had let her get away with so much that she ended up getting arrested for harassing young children. Even after this, they were asking me to step in and help her, as if I wasn't her first victim. My parents tried to argue back, but I told them that although I appreciated their apology, it didn't mean I was going to forgive and forget everything that had happened. Hearing this, my parents backed down. They told me that, regardless of whether I could help them financially, they still wanted to continue working on our relationship. My mom told me that she wished she and Dad had made different choices back then. But since they couldn't change the past, they wanted to be there for me in any way they could from now on. On one hand, I appreciated their willingness to move forward, but on the other, I wasn't sure I was ready to let go of all the pain that had been there for so long. I asked them for some time to think. It's been a month. My sister has been ordered to attend court-mandated counseling, which I suppose is a step in the right direction. My parents also had to pay a hefty fine because of what Rose did to harass those kids. I honestly thought my sister's punishment would be more severe, but I guess the judge showed some leniency since this was Rose's first official offense. On top of everything, some of the parents of the children involved have taken out a restraining order against my sister. Now Rose is legally required to stay far away from all their kids. If she violates that order, she'll be arrested. As for my parents, since that conversation where I refused to offer any financial help, they haven't brought it up again. We have continued to talk, but it's only about small, trivial things. I guess they really meant their words, and they're just trying to mend their relationship with me. Although I'm happy to be somewhat present in their lives again, I'm not ready to dive back into a full relationship with my family, especially not with Rose. I think I will never forgive her, no matter how much time passes. The things she did to me, bullying me, making my life miserable for so many years, are things that can't just be erased. I hope with counseling, she finally begins to hold herself accountable for her actions. Honestly, I'm not sure how long that will take or if it'll ever happen.